how we evaluate antivirus software, our thoughts on the platform Silent Donor, our solution to paywalls, Garmin Pay Privacy, and the Efani service. Welcome to the Surveillance Report 179 Q&A, where we are answering questions from our amazing patrons who allow us to make this podcast for all of you. If you would like to ask a question for our next Q&A, you can do so at patreon.com/surveillancepod, and the link is in the show notes. Our highlight question this week comes from David Johnson, who says, what resources do you guys rely on to assess and compare privacy across various antivirus products? David goes on to mention that recently Avast was selling user data, and Avast was a very popular antivirus software. They point out that antivirus is a very privileged application because it needs to see everything and it needs to be able to make changes. They mentioned that some people feel like you don't need antivirus because of Windows Defender and Linux has been an uncommon target. I personally do fall into the camp that I think most people don't need antivirus. I think Windows Defender has gotten pretty good. Mac has, what is it? It's called like XProtect or something, which is pretty good, but it also just has a bunch of other like built-in features that make it more resilient. Linux does have the whole security through obscurity thing, which is admittedly not good practice. There is also ClamAV there if you need, which is a little more privacy. It's not as good, I think, as the others from what I understand, but it's still something. And I think nowadays the vast majority of compromise is either going to be A, phishing, so like clicking a link, or I'm going to put this in its own category, B, downloading something. So, not to reignite the whole piracy thing, but if you aren't careful what you're doing, you can definitely download malware. The New Oil has definitely posted multiple stories about that. Or C, you did mention like unpatched vulnerabilities, but I think people are mostly going to exploit those against companies. That seems to be not that individuals can't be targeted, but companies seem to be the ones who have the most payoff. If you're going to put in the work to search for, find, and exploit vulnerabilities, I mean, it's not rocket surgery in a lot of cases. It's still hard enough that you're going to want a good payout for it. So I think most people can be just fine by keeping their stuff updated, being careful what they click on, being suspicious of things, maybe using virtual machines from time to time, things like that. That said, kind of with a lot of things in privacy that are a little bit more technical and above my head, I kind of rely on the endorsements of people I trust. So like Terry Parker has talked to the people, what's his name? Patrick Wardle from Objective-C, who makes don't they make Little Snitch?
They make Lulu, which is an open source alternative to
Lulu. That's right. They make, oh my God, there's like another big one that they make. I can't remember, but there's one that's specifically antivirus that they're really well known for. But yeah, they make like a whole suite of products, and I haven't heard anybody explicitly recommend any good Windows antivirus, but I do kind of like Malwarebytes just because I feel like they do really good research, and that kind of makes me think that they know what they're doing. I could be wrong. Feel free to let me know why. The last thing I want to add is you mentioned that, and I just want to agree with you, that it is the most privileged application. It requires having access to everything on your system so that it can look for any sign of compromise and make changes to quarantine it, delete it, whatever. It's really one of those things where you have to threat model and say, is this worth it? Is it not? I think for most people, it's probably not, but in certain scenarios, like if you are a high risk individual, or if you are in an enterprise environment, it may be worthwhile.
The only thing I'm going to add to this is, what real-time antivirus solutions are people even referring to on Linux? Real question. I feel like I think Sophos offers one. ClamAV, I don't think does real-time AV scanning, or you might be able to configure it to do that. But as far as I know, it's nowhere near as competitive as more.
I also don't think it does. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I don't think it does. What do they call it nowadays? Heuristic analysis. Like most Mac and Windows malware nowadays do heuristic analysis. I think ClamAV is still doing signatures.
I think Windows Defender does exist for the enterprise version on Linux, which people don't really know about. So I don't know how good that is. But yeah, in general, if you're on Linux, I don't really know what you're even going to be using. And then macOS is also by default has a lot of good things. And then you have other tools that they already mentioned if you need them. Next question's from Fallen Star. And they asked, have you heard of Silent Donor? They found it on the forum. And after trying it out, they thought it was a pretty cool way to support organizations anonymously. Both of us did some digging into it. We've never heard of it. So essentially what you do is you give money to this platform. The platform donates on behalf of you and pools the money together. And then that's a way to anonymously support organizations. I guess I would ask what the use case is for this, mainly because like I support organizations and I normally want the perks, or like I don't necessarily see the privacy issue. But if you're somebody who needs to support something privately and you don't want it to be tied to anything, then I can see why this platform might be useful. I don't really have any like huge pro or con takes on this outside of it seems like an interesting idea. And I haven't heard of anything like it before. That's all I got.
We'll move on to M's question, who says, OneFoot.io has just shut down, citing personal and financial reasons, and that was the most convenient way of bypassing news site paywalls, and I often shared links to stories with friends from that site. Do you guys know of another simple way of bypassing paywalls? I've installed I am Adam Dev's bypass paywalls extension, but do you have any better recommendations, or do you find data access requirements of this add-on problematic? I used to use Tor browser to bypass some limited number of articles soft paywalls, but increasingly that doesn't work on most common news sites, such as New York Times or Washington Post.
You sure it's not I am a damn dev?
I mean, that could be it too. I don't know. You're probably right, maybe.
No,
I don't know.
I think it's Adam.
So what I use, and I'm going to assume it's effective because people complain about it so much that I wrote a blog post about bypassing paywalls, very short post that I post in response whenever somebody's like, hey, this article you shared on The New Oil is paywalled. I don't even know because I use uBlock Origin has, I'm going to go check it right now. I think you have to add it. Brave has it by default. You can add it to uBlock Origin. It's called Bypass Paywalls Clean Filter. That's what I use, and it works 99% of the time. I also have my browser set to clear all data when I close, which I strongly encourage everyone to do for a variety of reasons. So I never really run into the soft paywall very often. I do want to point out, just for the sake of it, I'm not really shedding any tears over the New York Times or Washington Post. And I definitely do believe that like nonfiction stuff should be free. Like fiction is whatever, you know, it's entertainment, but nonfiction specifically, you know, there's that whole phrase, information longs to be free. And I do think it is kind of jacked up. That's why we don't paywall the basic version of the podcast that has the actual news. It's like the news is news. People deserve to know it. The public has a right to know. If you want our analysis and stuff, that's paywalled, whatever. But the actual news itself is free. So I kind of dislike that. That said, there is definitely differing qualities of journalism. I would pay for someone like 404 or Wired way before I would pay for the New York Times or Washington Post. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I just do want to acknowledge there is a moral argument to be made for bypassing paywalls. It is, since I was kind of on the anti-piracy side, it's worth noting this is kind of theft. This is kind of probably legally, morally gray. If it's a news source you use regularly that you do think is trustworthy, I would argue that you should support them if you're able to.
Yeah, I've actually never used any of these filters. Maybe I'll try experimenting with it, but my whole thing is if a site doesn't let me on, then I just leave. And then I think everyone's happy. You know, if the site doesn't want me there because I have a VPN on or whatever, then I leave unless I absolutely need to access the site. So when Reddit started blocking VPNs not too long ago, I was subscribed to a few Reddit subreddits in my RSS feed. I removed all the subreddits, and then I found alternatives on external platforms. So I have more of like a hardcore solution to that, which is either you allow me in and I get to access the content, and if you don't, that's fine. I get it. I'm also someone who paywalls some content, and I understand why people would do it, and that's fine. I'm just not going to pay for it or engage with it. So
you did remind me real quick. I do want to add on to that. Another really common trick I do if my usual paywall solutions don't work is just copy and paste the headline and post it in a search engine. Because basically what happens is a lot of the time there's one site like New York Times or Reuters or Associated Press that actually like publishes the story, and then everyone else just summarizes them or sometimes just copy and paste them. So if you copy and paste the headline, a lot of the time you'll find other websites quoting them or summarizing it or talking about it. And it may not be, especially if it's paywalled, it's usually not the same quality, but you'll still be able to at least like know what the story is.
All right, the next question is from John. Does using Garmin Pay for in-store purchases provide any privacy advantages compared to using my debit card? I have a de-Googled Pixel, so Apple and Google Pay are not an option. I did some quick research, again, very quick, so I don't know if there's some more nuances to this I haven't caught on to yet, but actually Garmin does some similar stuff as Apple, which is the card number itself is not stored on your device. It's not stored on their servers, and it's not passed to merchants. So it sounds like it's similar to Apple in that it's going to generate some new information that it will use in place of your debit card. And generally speaking, anytime you don't use your debit card, it's normally a win because of credit card skimmers. If you can do anything digital, there can be advantages to that. And also, if the merchant isn't getting your actual information, then that in some ways does improve your privacy. And even Garmin seems to have minimal information as to what you're doing. So it doesn't seem too bad. And I think there actually are some advantages based on very superficial initial research on this. But I'd have to look more into it to give you a more thorough answer. So I would get some second opinions, and I would kind of verify everything I've stated here to make sure it's accurate. And you can always ask communities as well. It's a pretty new question that I haven't really seen before.
Where's Jonah? We need him to make another video. And our last question comes from Kevin. Do you guys have any thoughts on the cell phone service Efani? Seems to be a good security upgrade to protect against SIM swapping, and considering the cell carriers already sell our data and have multiple data breaches, I don't see Efani being much of an increased risk on the privacy side. They've actually approached us a couple times about a sponsorship, I think probably in the form of an affiliate link. So if you guys are interested in this service, by all means, let us know. We never said no. We just kind of... The question I asked them, because the biggest use case I could see for this is we always talk about voice over IP is not an option in a lot of countries. If they offered their service in other countries, I could definitely see this being worthwhile for some people, but they do not. They are only available in America at this time. And that's kind of when I stopped responding to emails. So if you're watching this, I'm sorry, it's nothing personal. I'm just really busy and I just never circled back around to that. But I think, again, this is a threat model thing. We're big proponents of using voice over IP or just not using SIM whenever possible. The real hard sell, in my opinion, is that Efani is like $100 a month. I mean, that's unrealistic for me. I don't think I have that kind of threat model. I would not pay that. But again, it really comes down to you. If you have like a lot of money in the bank or a lot of assets, or you're like a public figure where your number is at risk of being swapped, and it might be worth it for you. But $100 is a lot to ask from people. So it's definitely not right for everybody. I do think you make some good arguments. I mean, cell companies are already having data breaches. They're already selling your data. It's not really like you're making things a whole lot worse. And they have this ridiculously high insurance policy. So the last thing I'll add is All Things Secured made a really good video where he tried out Efani. That could be worth checking out if you want more information. It seemed very thorough, in my opinion.
Yeah, just quickly taking a look at Efani, it seems like the main thing they're offering is pretty much, there's nothing that I'm seeing here that's actually unique about the SIM card or the service itself. They're really just a lot more strict about whether or not to allow a SIM swap. That's all I'm seeing, which is, for the record, really important. And I think, you go to the Efani website, I don't think it's targeted towards a lot of our listeners. It says here, protecting executives from top organizations, VIP crypto investors, influencers, and more. So I think it's geared towards people who probably have higher security threat models, people who are likely to be SIM swapped and targeted for SIM swap attacks. And that's who it's for. And I haven't tested it, so I can't speak to how good it is, but the product makes sense for the people who would want it. But yeah, like Nate said, $100 a month is a big ask for a cell plan.
Those were the questions this week. We had some questions on antivirus software, silent donor, Efani, our solution to paywalls, Garmin Pay, some really good stuff this week. And we appreciate every single person who asked a question, and we appreciate you guys for tuning in. So if you would like to be one of the people who asks a question, we very much appreciate the support. You can head on over to Patreon and you can join the Q&A there, patreon.com/surveillancepod. Last thing I want to add is just please remember to leave your questions on the most recent episode or the most recent Q&A. A couple of those were left on older episodes. I went ahead and added them in this time, but can't always guarantee we're going to see those in the future. But we do appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on Surveillance Report 180 this coming weekend.